I think, so my responsibilities after taking some time, we had to think about what did we have? What did we do? What aren't we doing that we should be doing? And there were some of those. And then, where are we going to go from there?
Welcome to Revenue Insights. Every week, we'll be joined by revenue leaders from some of the most successful and highest growing companies. Together, we explore how they built their revenue teams, the journeys that they've been on, and the lessons they have learned along the way. Revenue Insights is brought to you by Ebster. We're a revenue intelligence platform designed to help revenue teams to build more pipeline, close more deals, and retain more customers. Hello, and welcome to the Revenue Insights podcast. Today, I'm joined by Pilar Schenk, Chief Operating Officer of Cisco Global Security Collaboration. She's got a wealth of experience across operations at Cisco, McAfee, and Dell. Pilar, it's wonderful to meet you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Lee. It's lovely to meet you as well.
Thank you. Tell us a little more about your story. You've been at so many different enterprise-sized companies. I'd love to hear it from your perspective of the journey that you've been on to get to where you are today.
Sure. I think that I really grew up at Dell. So I spent 15 years at Dell. And Dell was a wonderful place to start my career because I was able to really discover what I loved and what I was good at. And within Dell, I did lots of different things. I think every 2.5, maybe 3 at the most years, I would do something different. So I did, the sales transformation. The first time we created specialists. And how does that work? And how do we get generalists and specialists to work together? And the sales model and the training and the profiling, all the rest of the components of it. I ran BI for sales and finance. So everything that went Michael all the way down to our reps. What's our management system? What should we look at? I raised my hand when we bought EMC. It was the largest tech merger ever. I knew nothing about integration. So, hey, I'd like to do that. I ran the IT component of the EMC integration. Anything from sales ops, I ran channel sales ops. We grew that business from 29 billion to 35 billion. I guess the commonality in my time at Dell, and what I learned about myself is that I really love change. I'm actually really awful when things are pretty normal and steady. I become very unhappy. I really like change. I really like being close to the customer. I like being close to the sales teams, and I love to drive growth. After 15 years at Dell, all of that change and learning, there were less places that I felt like I could get that incremental learning. It became that incremental value of doing that next job was just a little bit less interesting. And I've had a lot of mentors who said 2 things. One, great career at Dell, but unless you want to retire you need to do something outside, which I thought was great advice. Or, people are going to think that you're kind of a one-trick person that can only work within one company. And then second, by the way, hardware, Dell's done amazingly well. However, most of the growth right now and margin is in the SaaS business. So I switched gears. I went over to McAfee. McAfee was private equity owned. I got to, in comparison to Dell, McAfee was small, right? We were a couple $2 billion in overall. We had about 1,700 sellers, and it was like moving a speedboat. And we were, in the world of cybersecurity, which was a business that, or a market that was growing double digits, we were growing, we're negative double digits. I really feel like when you find a market that's growing double digits and you're not, then the ball's in your court. And so we fixed the business, we turned it around, did a lot of things there, and we IPO'd and then sold it off. Cisco, so why go back big again?
Yeah.
Cisco only a year, and I had heard amazing things about Cisco in terms of the type of people and the culture, which I think is incredibly true. And then collaboration was another one of those businesses where the market was growing and we were not. And so it needed some opportunity to turn the business around and figure out what we needed to go do. And so I came over here to try to fix the collaboration business. And then most recently, on my 1-year anniversary, they gifted me with security. So getting back to my cybersecurity roots. So lots of change, lots of different roles. I think that's by design. It's what I really, really enjoy. But I think the consistent theme is I really like driving change and transformation.
Amazing. And I love that you've been on the journey really from originally, kind of a sales opsy type role through to, we'll touch on revenue operations a little bit more, but I love that in the role that you're in now, it's very much around collaboration. So actually what I'm really intrigued by is, what are your responsibilities? Because I've come across businesses, that are, we're so big that actually implementing like revenue operations and getting that alignment is really difficult. And by the sounds of it, and I'm hoping you'll be able to fill in the gaps a little bit more, it sounds like at Cisco, it's very different. Actually, it's quite a mature approach to how you're getting teams to collaborate together.
So you want to talk about collaboration or how the RevOps or sales ops organizations is structured? Yeah.
Let's start with like your role more specifically in terms of, collaboration.
Yeah. So my official title is COO, or the Collaboration and Security Businesses. And you say, okay, well, what does that mean? And I think just COO, RevOps, Sales Ops, Commercial Ops, Biz Ops, all of the functions differ. And I think they differ by design in each company. And you have to look underneath it. When I joined the collaboration organization, they had a decentralized approach to operations. So there were lots of different functions and lots of different places. And they kind of handed it all together and said, go figure that out. I think, so my responsibilities after taking some time, we had to think about what do we have? What did we do? What aren't we doing that we should be doing? And there were some of those. And then, where are we going to go from there? We landed on 5 different kind of towers for our organization. The first tower is acceleration, which, I think sometimes it's an operation, sometimes does not. But this is where we spend a lot of time with customers, but then we take all of that input that we know from a customer perspective, deals and things like that. And we're, becoming very incremental in terms of how we're bringing that back to our sales organization. So sales plays, enablement, content, really thinking about like what's the best way, for example, to position a particular product, or what's the best way to have the conversation around hybrid work, and then bringing that instead of a one-to-one, one-to-many across the sales organization. The second function I have is go-to-market strategy and planning, which is, I think more normal, right? But that would be, if I had $1, where would I take it from and where would I put it? What's our capacity model? What's our segmentation model? Which market should we go after? Which segment should we go after? What's our TM? Why? Strategic growth projects. What's our strategy for the year? We have then the third tower is business transformation, which is really around process and tech stack, which we've done a ton of work on. Seller experience, which is, how do we improve the seller experience? And then we have some kind of support functions, things that are just really difficult, especially in a big company. You find things that are kind of just like, oh, that's really tough. Like, let's just put some help there. But they're really figuring out how do we improve productivity in the seller experience. And then last but not least, I think what every operations organization has is sales insights. So what you find in a typical BI function, plus, we actually put our territory and comp execution there and some of our geo-based support. I don't call it BI because I like to focus on outcomes. And so the leader I have that is in that place, really focusing on what we want to drive, which are insights rather than, hey, look, I deliver lots of reports. So 5 towers is where we landed. But I think in every organization it's different. And I think it's different by design because the companies need different things. And so you have to understand where the company's at, what the teams need, and then go from there. Obviously in RevOps, true RevOps, I think you often see things like marketing demand gen, sometimes you see CS, you can see deal desk, comp design and comp execution. I mean, there's lots and lots of varying forms of operations organizations. And again, it just depends on what the organization needs and I think where they're at from the maturity curve.
Thank you so much for the detail. The bit that I was really curious around actually was that the kind of a point that you made at the beginning, where when you went in, it was quite, to your point, decentralized. So how do you go into an organization such as Cisco, which, huge company, and actually unite everyone behind a single vision and a single way of doing things?
Well, fortunately, I don't have to unite all of Cisco because that's a tall
True.
task.
Yep.
But I did have to unite all of collaboration. And so we have around, let's call it 2,000 people across the collaboration organization. And so I think we're both uniting what is the collaboration organization around what is the role of ops. And also my own team, right? Because they have to feel, really compelled with this future state vision and super excited. And, in some cases their roles change and, that sometimes is a good thing and sometimes it's not. I think that's where you do a lot of listening. You start with listening to the business in terms of what they need and listening to the leaders on what they need, listening to the team on what they need and what they think they can do. And then tying that back into what we think is the future kind of state of the design and making sure that we listen and get feedback on that before we make those moves. So that's kind of how I did it. I would say that in some cases, the organization didn't know like what they were missing, right? And I think this is really common in rev ops and sales ops, which is they don't know maybe what others have or what rev ops or sales ops or whatever we call ourselves in the particular function could do for them. And I think that it's been the case in my last two jobs. And I think it's one of those things that we have to shape, right? And so, for example, when I was at McAfee, I brought in a leader who ran go-to-market strategy and planning. We didn't have the function. And he came to me after a week or two in the job and said, everybody keeps coming to me and saying, this is your job. And it was like, delivering goal sheets and, doing territories. I was like, well, yes, that is part of your job, but we need to teach and help the team see that actually we can do more than that. And we can help them figure out how to grow. And we should be a part of that conversation. And we can do the analysis on which markets to go after, which segments to go after, and how you might do that from a coverage and capacity perspective. And so I think even, at Cisco as well, sometimes I'll see work and say, actually, we can help with that. And I think ops, more broadly is going through a change, and some companies are in very different places, and some leaders, your sales leaders and different folks that you're working with are in very different places and expectations. And our job is to help shape what the scope of the role is and what it really could be, right? And to inspire a little bit of the art of the possible.
And that actually brings really nicely onto something that I'm quite interested to understand, because from what you've built out so far, as I kind of mentioned earlier, it sounds like the collaboration function is now quite mature in a sense, right? Out of, such a large company. So comparatively, do you think that many other businesses are kind of on the same trajectory in terms of maturity that you guys are at? Or do you think you're kind of ahead of the curve?
I think we have more to go. I think bigger companies that have been around for a while have a lot of incredible headwinds, right, or tailwinds, right, and that makes it way easier. Our salespeople can call a customer. They probably have worked with Cisco. They probably buy some networking gear. That call is answered, but they also have some tailwinds. Or headwinds on that, right, which are things that make it harder. We grew up as a hardware company. And we grew up as a networking company. And now for collaboration and security, there are, two of our biggest SaaS businesses, right, which operate really, really differently in how we look at the business, how we pay our people, what we should be doing, our sales motions. And so whether or not we are out ahead, I don't think so. I think that the role of operations is going through a transformation itself. I've worked for some time in a variety of roles that, look like operations, sound like operations. And I was just joking to someone who I was talking with last night. Operations used to be the function where, they had an extra finance leader or a sales leader. It's like, well, they don't have anything to do. Let's have them run operations. And, they would come in and great leaders can do anything. And it was much more support focused, right? If you need something, I'll get it done. Project management, give me a report. What I've seen over the years is that started to shift, and the organizations that are really taking advantage of the talent and the capability are starting to say, hey, you know what? If I had $1, where would I take it from and where would I put it? And now go figure out how you take that strategy and execute all the way down the pipe. Or like, tell me what's wrong in my, markets out in APJC. Tell me what's wrong with my, tier 1 countries versus, what is our strategy for tier 2 or some smaller countries? And how should I go to market and what should be my routes? And, how do I think about SP, and, service provider? So I think the role has gone through a massive shift. And I think companies are in very different places along that journey. My sense is that companies that are born in the cloud, SaaS companies, startups are like their start in a more advanced place in terms of how they look at rev ops and sales ops and all the different ops functions. I also think that's because they have to be, like, they're very, very scrappy and they have to constantly, their lifeblood is growth. Their lifeblood is, new business. And so you want to go after new business, get a really good rev ops team in place and really, capitalize on your data and the sales tools and all the things that are out there. And companies that have been around for a while are in varying places on that transition.
So on the topic of talent, is there a certain, are there characteristics that you look for in an operations person? Or is it, are you looking at experience, you're looking at potential? I'd love to know a little bit more.
Well, I always hire for potential, personally. I think smart people can do anything. But I think if you think the function's going through a transition, then the talent that you have is going to vary greatly. There are lots and lots of people who are really good at working with a sales leader and supporting. You need something, you need a report, I'll go pull it. You want me to go figure out what's going on with the forecast for today? I'll go do that. You want me to get a goal sheet out? Got it. And that's awesome. And really, really, that's a needed function. Where I struggle to find talent and often have to build it are the people who can really do the go-to-market strategy work and the sales play work. Go-to-market strategy, where if I take $1, where do I put it? What should be my SP strategy in tier 3 countries is heavily analytical. It's very consultative. And, it can become either like a strategic white paper, which is not, super helpful in sales. And by the way, we're still measured on targets and growth. So it needs to actually be something that we can do something with. And the people who are really good at the support, know the business, they know what's going on with customers, they can know with sales, but can they take a step back, dig into the numbers, come back out and say, in one slide with one amazing chart, this is where you should be headed and why. So I think it's a function that is very, very hard to hire for. We often will build it in terms of finding people who are heavy analytical, consultative, and then figuring out how we grow it.
Yeah, definitely from my perspective, interviewing lots of RevOps leaders, that's typically, quite an analytical mindset. Love getting into the numbers, love, but also problem solving as well, I think, is another one. But particularly with a lot of this, with a lot of the strategic elements, right? To move us away from that ever so slightly, and this is going to be a fairly broad question, but I'm intrigued to know, what has been the biggest challenge that you have faced in, let's say, the last 12 months? And how have you been, either able to overcome it, or how are you approaching overcoming it at the minute?
Last 12 months. 12 months I really was new to Cisco. I started a year ago. One of the things that was incredibly challenging when I started within the collaboration business is that we didn't have a lot of visibility to our numbers. And you think, Cisco's a huge company. They've been around forever. What do you mean? And that's kind of where I was.
Also a major problem.
How is that possible? And I think the reason behind that is collaboration is a different business, right? Again, like a more SaaS-based business in a bigger hardware company. Cisco has a very established version of Salesforce called Salesforce Main, right? That most of our account teams use. And we were able to look at it, but not really change anything in it. In a SaaS company, you often have a very different tech stack. So I started, and I found, a lot of our forecast calls were run out of Excel. Wow, right? This is really, really kind. And so we had to figure out what to go do. And I think that one of the biggest challenges was how quickly can we make that move? Like, how do you run a business if you can't see your numbers and pull levers and hold people accountable? So you can have a great strategy, but no one really knows. That's a no-go. And so we made a really big shift. And 3 months after I joined, we launched our own instance of Salesforce. Now, of course, it's really important. We're a broader Cisco. We want to show up to customers in a way that we have like hub and spoke, which means, what's happening in ours goes into the main and vice versa. But the idea that we couldn't really change things in the main instance of Salesforce, we couldn't run our own deals, those kind of things was just a no-go. So that was a big, big challenge, rolling out Salesforce, a new instance for a couple thousand sellers really, really quickly was a big deal. On top of Salesforce, you think, okay, well, cool. You have Salesforce, you can do lots of things when you get that right, but you're still missing lots of other things that we might be able to use in our sales process. What's going on activity level? What's going on with forecasting? Do we have sales cadences set up? What's our engagement? All sorts of other stuff that's pretty normal in a SaaS company. So the next question we had to face was how quickly could we add to our tech stack to start to get some of that visibility that is a competitive advantage for our competitors and was not for us. So in the last, I guess in a period of 4 months, we rolled out Salesforce, we rolled out a forecasting module, and we rolled out sales cadences. So it was a pretty significant change. I don't think the sellers were used to that level of capability in a tech stack, also that level of accountability. Our sales leader jokes kind of, that's like, there's nowhere to hide now. And it's true. I mean, we have incredible visibility. And then we coupled all that with a really great team underneath that does the sales insights. And so, they put all of that in a data source. We're able to, spit out things in 100 ways to Sunday, at the rep level, at manager level, and so forth. So I think for me, just biggest challenge was coming in and was like, oh my gosh, we don't actually have visibility to our business. Getting visibility to our business wasn't just creating some reports. We didn't have the data layer. And to get the data layer, you had to evolve the tech stack. And those changes often take a long time. And we didn't have a long time. So how quickly could we move? How quickly could we get full adoption? And how quickly could we change kind of the sales process for the collaboration team?
Yeah, I'm actually impressed that you were able to turn all of that around quite so quickly, right? And so what does that tech stack look a little bit more like now? You've obviously had even more time since then, and now you've got cadences in place and you've got more of a foundational layer, I'd say. What are the core components of your tech stack as of today?
Well, we have the three major components that we rolled out. And by the way, we took a pause after those three intentionally, right? Obviously CRM, forecasting, and cadences were the three areas that we focused on first. We are looking at account planning, right? And the right tools underneath that. And we're looking at engagement and content management. We have LMS already. So we haven't gone, we rolled all of that out between December and April, and then we stopped. Yeah, our end of year is in July. We wanted to land the plane with those areas. And we were also doing things, around our strategy. So we stood up a sales play engine. We had changed the go-to-market strategy. We were asking people to run sales plays and manage their pipeline differently than they had. And by the way, we're going to hold you super accountable to forecasting. And, have you heard of commit coverage? And why is it low? And, what's your confidence? And feelings don't belong in forecast calls. And so, it's one thing to be able to figure out like how technically to deliver it. It's a whole nother thing to change everyone's habits every day. And so we focused on those capabilities first. And then rolled it all out. And, I was just joking with the leader who did it yesterday because I told her, look, we're going to move really fast. And we're going to move so fast intentionally. I don't need everything to be an A. which was really hard for her. Like in this case, a B minus might be okay because we're going to go so fast that you're not going to be able to have an A. But fast is more important than getting this out over the next 2 years. And so we'll fix it over time. So technically you have to get it out, but then you have to get everybody to use it and use it differently and change the sales process. And so that's what we spent the rest of the year on, was rather than continuing to roll, capability. Let's learn to use the capability we have.
Yeah, I love that. Perfectionism's the enemy of progress, right?
That's right.
And love the idea of just, let's learn as we go and actually use that to improve it as you progress. Something that I was really curious to ask before we jumped on the call today. I believe you like the saying, together is power, correct?
I do.
So how do you recommend businesses actually begin, and to use one of my phrases that I like, singing from the same hymn sheet? How do you embrace this ethos of together is power?
Yeah, I love the saying together is power. I did lift it from our former CEO at McAfee, who now works at for Microsoft under Satya. But I do think we become much more powerful when we're not one-to-one, right? When we can be one-to-many, we can, you can put all the resources of, Cisco up to help our customers achieve their goals. We're way more powerful. But that's the hard part, right? Is getting everybody on, singing to the same, tune, or, getting us, orchestrated team. I think it requires a lot of conversations. And so my belief is one of the roles in my teams is that we should lead figuring out what is the tune we want to sing, whatever analogy you want to use, but what is our strategy? And I think we too often either do it in a vacuum, like it's Lee's strategy or Pilar's strategy. And then, by the way, I'm telling it to you and you're like, yeah, thanks, but you missed this and you missed that. Or we're just not super clear on what our strategy is. And so it's like, yeah, that's not really a strategy. So I think our role and how you get people to sing to the same tune is really spending time listening. You're certainly serving up the numbers. And then coming through, I like to, kind of use an approach where you have facts and you have alternatives and you get people deeply invested and debate so that when you land on where you are on those alternatives, like this is the place we need to go, people understand why we didn't go another direction. Then I think the next step along that is, okay, if you have a really strong strategy, how are you communicating it? How are you enabling it? Does it match what you're doing in hiring profiles? Does it match what you're doing in performance recognition? And probably one that I use a lot is what I call a business management system, which is how do you take your strategy into execution? So what's your cadences? If it's important, you should be spending time on it. What's your reporting for it? Like, how do you see that show up in, in metrics? And, sometimes we just enable a CRO, but probably the people that are the most important in enabling a strategy is the frontline manager. It's not just our CRO, not to, say they're not important. It's actually the frontline manager. So how are they seeing something different? So I think it's probably the hardest thing to do because, if you want me to go figure out a strategy or, figure out, some level of analysis, I can do that. But getting people to all row together or sing the same tune is way, way harder. And there's lots of options to do different things. But if you get people lined up, I think, more often than not, I think we have a great opportunity to be successful.
Yeah, I agree. It can be so incredibly powerful when everyone is, and going back to one of the first questions I asked of getting people behind, unified behind a single vision, a single mission. When you have that, I think you tend to find beautiful things start to happen. And obviously the difficulty becomes, as you grow and you start to employ more people, is how do you keep that in place and how do you keep people aligned to the same vision, to the same goals, and then actually start to build that out over everything else that you're beginning to create, which is challenging, I'm sure. Last question that I want to ask. What is one book that you would recommend to other operations leaders?
My favorite book that I recommend people to read, and I've recommended it to my team, is a book called Great at Work. Create at Work is really simple. It's a quick read, and it's heavily analytical. So, I think it's really practical. But the concept of Great at Work is that the most successful people or their most successful organizations pick a couple of things and they obsess about them. And how, what to do if you have a boss that, maybe is a very creative thinker and is constantly coming to you, to chase this squirrel and this and that, right? Because that's not going to make you or the organization as successful. And so in the book, they have this phrase, do less than obsess. And I really, really think it is incredibly important. There's so much coming at us every day. Customers, internally within our teams, lots of great ideas. We have all this amazing content. Like there's a lot out there, more than ever. But it's a lot to consume and figure out what are the places that I'm really going to spend my bucks on. I'm really going to spend my time on, and how am I consistent with that? And so I really think that learning to figure out what are those really important things, which is that strategic planning process we just talked about. Listening, learning, probably finding out that maybe what you originally thought wasn't right, but like really figuring out what are those couple things and then being obsessed about them. And sometimes consistency is incredibly important. If our do less than obsess is we pick 3 things, but then a quarter from now we pick 3 new things. And then a quarter from now we pick 3 new, more things. Like, hey, we're going to do Salesforce and our forecasting and cadence. And then we're going to do nothing else but landing those things for another 2 quarters after that. Like you have to pick a couple things. And I think you have to be incredibly consistent about it. So I love Great at Work. It's a super practical read. I do think, we have more information and more data than ever coming at us. But the trick is figuring out how to consume that all and pick a couple arrows and stick with those arrows and obsess about them.
Excellent recommendation. We'll definitely include a link down in the show notes below. Pilar, thank you so much again for joining us. For anyone that's listening and wants to hear more about what you're working on at Cisco, hear more about Together is Power, and more of your thoughts, where can they find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. So there's certainly, other podcasts, webinars, and things like that. And I always love to keep in touch with people. I learn a lot from conversations I have with other leaders who have what problems they're facing, what they're doing, what we're doing, comparing notes. And so, find me on LinkedIn.
Amazing. We'll put that in the show notes as well. Thank you so much again. It's been an absolute joy to have you on the podcast today. And to everyone that's been listening, thank you so much. And we'll catch you next week. Thanks for listening to Revenue Insights. If you want to learn more, subscribe to our newsletter and we'll deliver every episode straight to your inbox. If you have any questions, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. Our links will be in the episode notes. See you next week.